Hello, hello, hello. This is Dr. Eunice Benja. I am going to be speaking about clinical psychology, but I have introduction chapter, which is what I'm going to call lecture one. My names are Dr. Eunice Benja. As I said that, I am a psychology professor back in the US. I have taught psychology, developmental psychology, and many other developmental courses, so including sociology. So this is really my best subject to teach because I am also in the clinical psychology field. So welcome to my class. So because I have the experience that I have teaching and the textbooks that I have been using, I want to make sure that I give credit to the textbook that I'm going to be using for the rest of this class. This is the Science of Psychology, an Appreciative View, 5th edition by McGraw-Hill. That is where we are going to get the information from. So everything that I'm going to speak about today is really credited to this book. I am not sponsored by them. I am just giving credit to them. So let me talk a little bit about what we are going to cover in this particular chapter or this lesson. We will be looking at the definition of the word psychology or the study of psychology. We will be looking at some of the approaches and mainly health and wellness, since this is clinical psychology. We'll touch a little bit on the history of psychology and also talk about careers. So this is what we are going to cover in this lesson, and I will definitely hope that you tune into other lessons that are going to follow after this, because this is just kind of like introduction. So one of the things that I really want to say that as I explain what psychology is and try to describe, a lot of times that you will hear when people talk about psychology, they usually think about the negative or just the clinical psychology, but we also have the positive psychology, which is a movement right now that we talk about other positive psychology that is relevant. We just don't talk about mental disorders when you talk about psychology as a whole. So when you're speaking about general psychology, so we want to discuss, some of the roots who were the early scientific foundations of psychology, and that's what I'm talking about, the history, and of course summarize some of the main approaches that have been used in psychology to teach psychology and also to apply psychology in human development. And also maybe you are in this class because you are taking psychology as a course, or you actually taking psychology as a career. So yeah, stay tuned. So if I were to ask you a question, what did you know about psychology? I think when I love when I'm teaching this class, face to face, and I have students who can answer questions, and I ask them, like what they know about psychology, and I hear a lot of, answers. Some of them are very creative, some of them are funny. But I want to ask you this question. You can pause and actually write it on your note. How many of you know a clinical psychologist, or how many of you know somebody who works in a psychology career? So you might have an idea when you heard the word psychology, or maybe just where did that idea come from? Why did you come to this class? Why are you taking a psychology related class or course or whatever you call it in your country? Or why do you want to venture into the field of psychology? So those are some of the questions that I want you to just ask yourself, as you as you dive into this course, so that it can really make sense. So maybe when I say something, you're like, oh, okay, I didn't know so-and-so worked in this area. Ah, you mean they did psychology? Okay, so just have that at the back of your mind. You may answer these questions, or you may just, just let me talk about it. So the other things that we're going to try and do is understand the complex and even the simplest behavior of a human being, such as why people engage in courageous acts, like somebody dive into the does skydiving, or somebody wants to swim across an ocean, or whatever it is. Those are some type of courageous acts, but the only way to understand why somebody makes such a decision is to talk about psychology. So we want to study psychology so that we can understand why somebody's brain or behavior acts the way it does. So not only do psychologists study extraordinary behaviors, they also study everyday experiences of people. Like this morning when you woke up, what did you do? Did you yawn? Did you run to the bathroom? Did you look at your phone? All of that is, it's not complicated. It's not, something that you would really call extraordinary, but it's the little things that people do every day. You wonder why you met somebody as you came to this class, or as you are going to the library to use the internet. Why did somebody say hi? Why did people not say hi to you? Why did somebody smile, never said anything? It's all understood through psychology. So psychology is in the category of science, so it is considered a science. I hope that it is not considered an art. I know some countries like my motherland where they think that psychology is an art. Psychology is really a science, but it is different from other sciences. And if you're taking this class and you've already taken my sociology class, you probably know what I'm talking about. So it is very different from other sciences. This is not a natural science. So when we're talking about what the science focuses on, it focuses on the many facets that make people who they are. Okay, so it is going to touch a little bit about sociology, but let's really look at the scientific definition of psychology. Okay, so what is psychology? There you go. So psychology is a scientific study of behavior and mental processes. So you're talking about the observable things, what we can directly see, what people do. Okay, I also say that psychology is a science. It uses a scientific method to observe human behavior and draw conclusions based on those observations. So when we do research, in psychology, when we are studying people, when we are studying people's behavior, we use scientific methods. That's why we categorize psychology as science, okay? So what is behavior? Everything that you as a student, everything that you as a listener to this course, that you do, that people can see, like when you write down, when you walk, when you run, that is what we categorize as behavior. And then we also talk about mental processes. What are mental processes? Everything that you cannot see. You guys can't see me. You can observe my behavior because you can listen. You are probably, I'm sure you are seeing me scroll through the slides or the PowerPoints. You can see them moving, so you're able to observe that. But you really don't know what I'm thinking about every time I click on next. So those are the mental processes, the internal thoughts. You can't see my feelings, you can't see my motives. Those are not directly observed. So that is what you're talking about, mental processes. So I hope you got it clear. So we have just defined what psychology is. So when you are going to talk about what we study in psychology, it's really everything, the behavior and the mental processes, and each one of them affects the other. Okay. So the psychological frame of mind. Um, so when we're talking about psychology as a science, it is because we can be able to study scientifically. Okay. It is nowhere in science that we accept assumptions at face value. Psychology doesn't do that. It does not accept assumptions at face value. It uses a structured empirical method to study human behavior. Why am I saying that? Because we are supposed to be critical thinkers. When we talk about critical thinking in psychology, that's all we use. We don't make assumptions. I know a lot of people make assumptions. You might see somebody posting something, trying to define behavior or why people act the way they do using the assumptions, but that is an assumption. So that doesn't qualify as empirical method. So we have to be skeptical. We cannot receive everything that is posted on social media and accept it as psychology. You might hear people say, I know what you're going to do. I know why you did that. But that is all an assumption. So at the core of this scientific approach are four attitudes, which is the critical thinking, the skepticism, objectivity, and curiosity. Because as a scientist, we want you to use your critical thinking. What is critical thinking? When somebody say, are you critically thinking? This is the process of reflecting deeply and actively. So you're going to have to be able to ask questions and evaluate the evidence. When we go into the field to do research in psychology, human behavior, or whatever we do, like I did when I was, doing my master's, and when I was doing I have done a lot of research, but when I was doing my PhD, I had to, use my critical thinking. I did have these questions that I was asking my participants, and I was evaluating based on what they were telling me, what the theories say, what other researchers have said, to be able to evaluate that evidence before I can write it, before I can tell you that is why people think the way they do, or that's why certain children behave the way they do, or they speak the way they do, or I have to be able to have gone through that process of deeply and actively and asking questions and evaluating, and then evaluate the evidence, because before I do that, I cannot tell you why somebody behaved, or a certain group of people or a cultural group behaves the way they do, until I can be able to do that. You as a student, or even whoever is listening, you are supposed to be skeptical. You don't receive everything that you read on social media, or what people say, post on, write in the newspapers, or talk about on the TV channels or the radio channels. As psychologists, we are supposed to be skeptical. So we ask the question, what people know, and apply it to everyday life to challenge assumptions. So, for example, if somebody say that, all Kikuyus are thieves, that is an assumption. Okay? So I would have to really do a very vigorous study, a scientific study. I would really ask questions, and I would ask different people all over the country and ask them, do you believe that all Kikuyus are thieves? But that's probably not the question I would ask. But, I would have to really know. I cannot assume. So we pursue precise information, and we have to make sure that that information is understood in our topic before we share it. The same way, we're not going to use pseudoscience to treat people in clinical psychology. So we have to be objective. So pseudoscience is information that is presented as if it was scientific, but is not actually supported by sound scientific research. So whatever you're reading on newspaper, on social media, saying that, parents from this country, this is how they parent their children, and that's why their children become bright, or things like that, that is probably pseudoscience, unless it is published in an empirical research in a journal that is really has been obviously edited, or peer-reviewed journal. Everything else that is published out there, as psychologists, we are going to call it pseudoscience. It does not have any evidence. It doesn't have any scientific evidence, and so we have to be very, very objective. So psychologists are objective and only use empirical methods to evaluate events, data, and individuals as they are, not as we would like them to be. Okay? So for example, let me say I have been given this grant and I want to study the behavior of JQuat students, or university students, from wherever country, and then I am told to do this study and find out why certain students, or why university students drop out of college. Okay, so when I'm going into that research, I need to be very, very objective. I cannot be subjective. I cannot go knowing, because I was once a college student, I know people drop out because of money. I know people drop out because the course is hard. I know people drop out because of peer influence. I cannot go saying that. When I am going into the research, I have to be very objective. I'm ready to use the method that I have chosen for my research to be able to evaluate, to be able to collect data, speak to people, and observe so that I can make that conclusion. Okay, so that now brings about curiosity. Okay, so you asked me, why do college students drop out of college? Okay, that makes you curious. So you are asking that question and wondering about that particular issue. So that is what really makes you a good psychologist or good scientist. All right? Okay, I hope you got that psychological frame of mind and what that's all about. Okay? So now we are going to be talking about what I just said from the beginning, that psychology is a general science, and it is not only limited to psychological disorders. When people hear about, a psychologist, when they hear, clinical psychologist, or they hear, somebody who is working in the psychology field, they only think about, you mean you treat the people that have mental disorders? No, there is also the positive psychology, which really emphasizes human strength. Okay. When you talk about some of the people that really are very well known in the field of psychology, like Freud, pioneered the original perceptions of what people knew about psychology, and since then these perceptions have been mainstreamed into TV and the media. I don't know how many people, when they want to talk about the bad part of psychology, they will bring up somebody like Freud into the mix. Okay, because when people are careless, when people are not scientists, when people are just journalists, and I'm not saying that all journalists are subjective, I'm saying when people just want to put things out there for human consumption, which is, you can say things carelessly, somebody will say, I have done psychology, I know you're crazy, I have done psychology, I know that, I can read your mind, and those type of things. So there is that negative connotation that is always portrayed in the field of psychology. psychology seeks to understand the truth of human life and all its dimensions, the negative, the positive, including people's best and worst experiences. So we don't just use psychology to talk about the worst experiences such as psychological disorders. Okay, so some psychologists argue that their field has focused too much on the negative aspects of humanity and has neglected qualities that reflect the best of human life. If you want to study about the happiest couple, we want to when we want to study the happiest city, the happiest country where people are very, very happy, they don't have any sadness, we use psychology. So that is positive psychology. So we don't want to just focus on that negative even when we are learning in the field of psychology. The branch of positive psychology was pushed by recent scholars for more emphasis on the positive and good aspects of human behavior. So they wanted to focus more on what humans value, the traits associated with optimal capacities of love and work, and positive group and civic values. So because I am also so much in the marriage and family therapy part of psychology, I know that we use that a lot. We know we have these theories that really talk about love and soothing, and they do use the psychology aspect to explain about why people can be happy in relationships. Okay, so there is that part that is really the happy side of psychology, and I want us to focus on both of them. Okay, so let's talk about the history of psychology. So when we talk about the history of psychology, we talk about thousands of years. Okay, people have been trying to ask basic questions like I asked, why do people behave the way they do? How do our senses perceive the world, the country? How do we learn? What is memory? Why does one person grow and flourish? Why do some students complete their degree and others don't? Why do dreams matter? Can people learn to be happier and more optimistic than be sad? So all these early philosophers, that's all they were talking about. You hear names like, Plato, Aristotle. You hear, about all these great people that have been there before. Willmann Wandert, a German philosopher, physician, founded the academic discipline of psychology. You also hear about people like William James, who talks about functions and purposes of the mind, mind's interactions with outside world, stream of consciousness, why is human thought adaptive? So those are some of the things or some of the questions that some of these theorists or psychologists had in mind. And so we're gonna be talking about a lot of them, and especially in the coming sessions. But at this moment, I just want you to know that there is a history. There are people that really worked on this subject. These studies focused mainly on sensation and perception, because there were the aspects that could be broken down into component facts. So we're going to be hearing a lot about some of these people. We know the Western philosophy, biology, and psychology, as we talked about. I know some of you know about Charles Darwin. Charles Darwin is functionalism meshed well with another intellectual development. So his principle, Darwin's principle of natural selection, which really considers how organisms adapt to their environment. You've heard survival for the fittest. This is the guy behind our survival for the fittest. How the organisms adapt to their environment, they survive, they produce offspring. He talks about genes that are associated with survival are more likely passed down from one generation to the next. And I know you probably have heard a lot of, people say that, you have the genes of survival. You can survive in every aspect or in every context. And species change through random genetic mutation because definitely people are not living as they used to. There's that genetic mutation. We've heard about things like cancer, which explains why members of a species are different from other members. So you will never be the same because we are all different. We have different DNA, and that's really what makes us very, very different. So we'll be talking a little bit about that. So the natural selection, we're talking about the competition for resources, why, and this is something, competition for resources, that you're going to hear about even in other sciences like sociology. Some of the genes that really, favor genetic characteristics that promote production and survival. Environmental changes alter, course of evolution. All right. So somebody else, like, women of color also contributed to psychology despite facing great discrimination. We know somebody called Mary Calkins, who was the first female president in the American Psychological Association. About Charles Turner, who is also often recognized as the first African American to conduct psychological research. So we know that, in the history of psychology, there's so many people that we can't even mention all of them that have really played a great role in developing this field. Okay. So for the contemporary approaches, so we do have the biological approach, whereby, the biological approach is going to emphasize the study of the body, especially the brain and the nervous system. So this is really where, even in clinical psychology, that we really talk about, we talk about the brain and the body, this neuroscience, which is a scientific study of the structure, function, development, genetics, the biochemistry of the nervous system. So this is going to emphasize the brain and the nervous system as the central for understanding behavior, thought, and emotion, and has spread to many other research areas, including developmental neuroscience. From when I was beginning to speak with this lesson, I also talked about that I do teach developmental psychology, social neuroscience, and behavioral neuroscience, as those are some of the examples. So when we talk about the behavioral approach, this is really where we just focus on the behavior. It emphasizes the scientific study of observable behavioral responses and their environmental determinants. So some of the behavioral scientists that we know are known a lot. Somebody like John B. Watson and B.F. Skinner, who were the first behaviorists. Behaviorism dominated psychological research during the first half of the 20th century. So it's just talking about how certain human beings are, tend to behave in certain environmental context. Okay, so the psychodynamic approach is going to emphasize the unconscious thought, the conflict between biological instincts and society's demands and early family experiences. This is where Sigmund Freud was the founder of the psychodynamic approach. He believed that a person's early interactions with the parents were the major factor that shaped an individual's personality. And we continue to believe the same, a lot of children, they are born into their parents' home, and their parents start to socialize them and shape their behavior and shape their thoughts as well. So these are some of the things that we talk about every day. You are like your mom, you're thinking like your father, and then that shaped your personality. So when you talk about the humanistic approach is going to emphasize a person's positive qualities, the capacity of positive growth. I do like talking about something like, especially I'm talking about families, strategic humanism. We have some of the model contributors that really talk about, like Chloe Madens, that really talk about when she's talking about family, individuals and how members interact. She want to look at the positive side of the human being, not the negative side of the human being. That's really what is humanistic approach. And the freedom to choose and destiny. Humanistic psychologists stress that people have the ability to control their lives and avoid being manipulated by the environment. So it's not that the environment is always interfering with our mind and our behavior. It's that we can choose to live in that same environment and command that environment so that it doesn't have to influence our behavior. So this is the humanistic approach. Topics such as altruism and optimism are largely studied under this approach. So this is the beautiful positive psychology. And then we do have the cognitive approach. This is the emphasis, the mental processes involved in knowing how we direct our attention, how we perceive, how we remember. So it is also focusing on our memory and how we think and solve problems. So this is really a great, cognitive approach is going to be there forever. And I know that it is really informing especially the clinical psychology now, because we have all these age groups of younger people that are losing their memory, like Alzheimer's, dementia being early onset, and so they are going to use a cognitive approach, because this is really focusing on how we remember things, how we perceive, how we learn, and how we think and solve problems. So often scientists who adopt this approach focus on information processing, like how does our brain process information? When you read something, how is your brain able to interpret those letters into thoughts and things like that? The way the human mind interprets information, it tells a story and applies it to decision making. So that is a great approach. I really like that. So the evolutionary approach uses evolutionary ideas such as adaptation, reproduction, and survival of the fittest. That's what we're talking about, the natural science by Charles Darwin, as a basis for explaining specific human behavior. So why are people stealing in Kenya right now? Because the economy is bad and people have to survive. That survival of the fittest, of course, that's not how we want people to survive. Unfortunately, because they want to survive, that influences their behavior. So evolutionary psychologists believe that their approach provides an umbrella that unifies the diverse fields of psychology. All right. And then finally, we have the socio-cultural approach. So this is, again, for people who are taking my sociology class, this is really what you're going to be talking about. Socio-cultural approach is going to be great in sociology course, because it emphasizes the ways in which the social and cultural environment influence our behavior. So with the rise of cultural diversity in every part of the world, we are right now calling, we are saying that we live in a global village. You can see, like, Kenya, we don't have to ask people for visa, so we are going to have a lot of diversity, including on top of the 43 tribes that we have in our country, we have so many other tribes now, so many other nationalities, so many other races. So with this rise of cultural diversity in the world, like even here in the United States, research on the influence of culture on behavior, that has led to important findings in the role that culture plays in our sense of self. And I know for sure, whether you are a Kikuyu, whether you are a Kamba, whether you are Luo, or whether you are an American or a Briton, you have a way to say that my culture, my Kikuyu culture, my Kenyan culture has really influenced my behavior. So I said hello because in my culture, we have to say hello. I'm giving you chai when you come to my house because in my culture, we have to serve people, we have to show love. So that is the social cultural approach, right? I hope you're taking your notes because I am nearing the end. But before I end this session or this lecture, I want to talk about, some careers in psychology. So I have given you all these approaches. And really what those approaches are going to end up being is that they are also related into the careers that are available in psychology. So when we talk about the practice, applied, research, teaching, you can go into practicing psychology, you can go into the research, avenue, or you can end up being in the teaching avenue. All right, so there's a variety of career options for scholars in psychology. So some people are going to seek employment in universities like I am doing. I am teaching students where they teach and conduct research. I actually do both. So yeah, we just published a paper on domestic violence or intimate partner violence in Kenyan couples in the US. That is my latest research. So I am doing both teaching and conducting research. Others may work in businesses and industry. So there are people that are going to be psychologists. They're going to be working in the business part, looking at, psychology of mind. How does that influence consumer behavior and things like that. How do people relate in an industry or in a workplace, while still others may work in private practice. So that can be in a hospital, that can be in a clinic, or things like that. So individuals who are primarily engaged in helping others are called practitioners of psychology, which is really the clinical psychologists. Okay, providing therapy that is considered evidence-based practice. Okay, so this is another thing. If we have clinical psychologists that are practicing psychology and they are not evidence-based practice, then they are not providing the correct services, because we want to make sure, again, that when we are practicing psychology, we are using methods that have been proved to work, that have been researched on, and we know that, this is not just theory, this is evidence-based method that I'm going to use on my client because I expect this, result, which is what we say it is empirically supported. A clinical psychologist typically has a doctoral degree in psychology, and because I'm using an American textbook, that is true, while it is not always, it's not true in other countries. So people that are called psychologists in Kenya or clinical psychologists don't necessarily have to have doctoral degree in psychology. So there are some terminologies that I cannot call myself in the US if I don't have a doctorate. While a psychiatrist has a medical degree, that's not always the case in Kenya. So, and specializes in abnormal psychology and psychotherapy. So before people call themselves psychologists, you have to have this, this level of education. But as again I said, depending on the country where you're practicing. Okay, so I know that for you to be called as a professor, of psychology, you have to have a degree, you have to have gone through some levels of research and things like that. It's not always the same in every country. Okay, so I can call myself a professor in the US. I might not be able to call myself a professor in Kenya because, there are levels or stages even after doctorate to be called a professor. That is a topic for another day. So as we continue on the areas of specialization with psychology, I want you to be putting this on your mind. You might not be taking psychology as a course or as a degree or a major, again, different terminologies. But you can maybe be looking at, if you were taking occupational therapy and you want to go ahead and do your master's degree, maybe to be able to be marketable in different countries, be thinking about some of these areas of specialization. Okay, so the first one is psychology and behavioral neuroscience. This physiological psychology focuses on the physical processes that underlie mental processes. Behavioral neuroscience focuses also on biological processes, specifically how the brain affects the behavior. So these are some of the terminologies that you're gonna hear, but if you focus on this area, you can definitely be working with clients who have mental disorders. If people come into your office and they want to know why their children are behaving that way, or why their loved one is behaving that way, you can be, this is your field of specialization. So you can take this even on to research part of it. As we progress, obviously there's going to be a lot more to explain. Of course, the other area of specialization is sensation and perception. Sensation and perception researchers focus both the physical system and the psychological process that allows individuals to experience the world. Okay, and then of course the learning is the complex process by which behavior changes in response to changing circumstances. Cognitive psychology is broad. It's really a broad field that includes examples such as attention, when we want to talk about the attention span, consciousness, information process, and memory. And sometimes even people who have sleep disorders, they might, somebody who has specialized in this area can be able to study. Researchers in this area are often called experimental psychologists. Okay, so there is also developmental psychology. This is something that I really teach a lot, because developmental psychology studies how individuals change. So this is from actually conception to death. So when the child is conceived, all the way to childhood, adolescent, youth, young adult, graduating to college, getting married, work, that age group, retired age group, and of course all the way to when somebody really dies. So that is what you cover. Studies those changes, we call them life cycles, both as a result of biology and environment from birth through death. So developmental psychologist inquires range across the biological, cognitive, and social domains of life. And then of course motivation and emotion. Motivation focuses on how individuals attain goals and how rewards affect the experience of motivation. So this is something that, obviously emotion centers on the physiological and brain processes that underlie emotional experiences, the emotional expression of health, and the possibility that emotions are universal. So when you talk about even motivation, this can be used by people who are actually marketers, what really motivates consumers to buy this item and not the other item. What motivates a child to do well in school or to study more, and things like that. So psychology of women and gender. So that is, obviously something that has really been focused on. Psychology of women and gender studies psychological, social, and cultural influences on women's development and behavior, while also addressing interest in the broader topic of gender and the ways our biological sex influences our ideas of ourselves as men and women. So that actually includes men as well. And then, of course, personality psychology. I have really enjoyed teaching personality development class or personality psychology, because this is also a very intriguing topic. Personality psychology focuses on the relatively enduring characteristics of individuals. Like, I really like talking about traits and how they develop, goals and motivation, genetics, personality development, and including well-being. Okay. So we're going to continue. We have more careers. Social psychology. Social psychology deals with people's social interactions, relationships, social perceptions, social cognitions, and attitudes. Researchers are interested in how groups or individuals influence the behavior of others. Industrial and organizational psychology. Actually, this is something that I do know that is really, really needed. It's a growing, obviously industry. Industrial organizational psychology focuses on the workplace, both the workers themselves and the organization that employs them. The main areas of industrial psychology focus on personnel matters and human resource management. So people who have really done this degree can find themselves working in the human resource department, because while the main area of organizational psychology focuses on the social influence in the organization. So again, there's a lot of sociology in the industrial and organizational psychology as well. The clinical and counseling psychology, which is really why we are in this class. Clinical and counseling psychologists diagnose and treat people with psychological problems. So clinical psychologists are interested in psychopathology, which is a scientific study of psychological disorders. So how do we treat these disorders, and why do these disorders develop? And of course, the process of diagnosing those disorders. And that's really the field of mental health. And of course, this is broad as well. When we specialize in clinical psychology, because that's what we're going to be talking a lot in this course, we'll definitely talk a lot about many, many, many areas of career that people can, venture into. Of course, health psychology emphasizes psychological factors, including lifestyle and the nature of the healthcare delivery system. We talk a lot about health psychology, especially in insurance industry. This is really the positive part of the psychology. Community psychology is also the positive part of the psychology. Community psychology focuses on accessible care for people with psychological problems. Community psychologists may work in community-based mental health centers and provide outreach programs to people in need. Yeah. School and educational psychology is also the positive side of it. School and educational psychology centers concern children learning and adjustment in school, which is really something that we really need to have a lot, especially in our public schools in Kenya. Just recognizing some of those developmental issues that may make children not necessarily do very well in school, and maybe having intervention. And then environmental psychology is the study of the interactions between people and physical environment. Again, that is also the field of sociology. Forensic psychology is really applies psychological aspects to the legal system. Forensic psychologists are often hired by legal teams, to provide, FBI, DCI, to provide input about aspects of trials such as jury selection, and to testify as experts in such trials. When you study forensic psychology, I know some of you watch NCIS or Criminal Minds. Those are the people that have studied forensic psychology, so they can look at somebody's behavioral pattern and actually lead to where that person is going to perform a crime, or maybe actually even say why they, killed so and so. Sports psychology is also the positive part of psychology. Sports psychology applies psychology's principles to improving sports performance and enjoying participation. Cross-cultural psychology, again, is going to be spilling over to the sociology class. Cross-cultural psychology is going to focus on culture's role in understanding behavior, thought, and emotion. So I might be able to just study the culture of a certain group of people and actually be able to interpret how that culture has impacted how they behave or how they're thinking. All right. So if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to shoot those questions to me through your class representative. You can put them in under the comments section, and I'll really, really appreciate it. I really thank you for coming all the way towards the end of this course, and I hope, or the end of this session, and I hope that you will be joining me to the next session, which is lecture number 2. This is lecture number 1. And as I conclude, it's the science of psychology, health, and wellness. And this is where we're talking about how the mind impacts the body. The way you think and feel impacts the state of your body's health. For example, if you eat right, if you don't smoke, if you don't drink alcohol, if you don't take drugs, your body, how you feel, how you behave, your general body health is going to be totally different when you exercise as well. So we're talking about how the body impacts the mind, because it is a two-way traffic. The body is going to impact the mind is going to impact the body. How the body impacts the mind, the way you treat your body affects your thinking. So as you end this class, I want you to get up and stretch and take a deep breath, and then you are going to realize how much that oxygen is going to really impact how you remember the things you have learned in this course by the end of the semester when you do exam. So take care of your body, because if you take care of your body, your mind is going to be fresh, your mind is going to remember a lot of things, and you're going to end up doing very well in this class. If you get a good night's sleep, you don't go to Burudani every night, you don't go to a club every night, you don't trust night every night. You have a good night's sleep, you eat healthy food, not junk food. You eat healthy food. As a college student, I know junk food is always easy to eat. I know it feels lazy to cook. I don't want to cook. I don't want to go out to eat food, so I'm just going to get this bag of chips and eat. By then I'm from Nyeri, so I'm a shrub. Your mind will be clearer and you will be able to focus more on the task that is ahead of you. And the task ahead of you as a student is definitely to be able to do well in school, so that you can become the best occupational therapist, the best psychologist, the best whatever you want to become, so that you can take care of your needs in the future. And I hope that by the time you graduate, there will be jobs. And even if there will be no jobs, I want you to venture into working anywhere in this globe, because we live in a global village. Often, major questions about the impact of nature versus nurture on a variety of psychological topics are considered in this debate. So, the question is, do you think your environment impacted your behavior today, your minds, your thoughts? Or do you think that who nurtured you? Your mom, your dad, your grandmother, your sibling, your older sibling, or maybe your culture? What do you think played a major role in shaping you? So this is a topic that you're going to hear a lot, a debate that you're going to hear over and over, especially in clinical psychology and even in sociology, because it's a continuous debate. But do we really know whether it's the nurture or the nature? The nurture, like N-U-R-T-U-R-E, nurture, or nature, N-A-T-U-R-E. What really shaped you? What made your personality what you are today? It's a great discussion. It's a great debate. Take care of yourself. You're in clinical psychology because it is very, very important that you take care of your brain and you take care of your mind and you take care of your thoughts and your feelings as well as your body. Go and be healthy. Self-care is very, very important. You have to take care of yourself. All right. Have a good day, good night, best depending on when you're listening to this lecture. And I can't wait to see you face to face. And even if I'll never see you, I know that you will take care of your mind, because you need your mind to do a lot of things that you have to do as a young person in this world. Okay? Bye.